Let's double check. Um, I'm volunteer training coordinator. I like to tell people a little bit about myself when I get started. This is my lovely family that I was home taking care of last week. My wife Vivian and my daughter Rose. She's almost 4 months old. Um, yeah, that's my family. I have a background in teaching, so before I worked here, I was a third and fourth grade teacher for about 5 years. Um, and while I enjoyed a lot of aspects of that, there are those parts that I really did not, and eventually moved away from it. So I'm pretty happy with where I am now. I've found something that I feel like is sort of related to education, um, but it doesn't have all the same sort of frustrations that I felt that the public school system does. Um, I have a lot to say about that. You'll hear me. Okay, so these are just some agreements. We'll go over these each morning, but just a reminder. Number one, make sure you take care of yourself. Some of the things we're going to talk about might be triggering. So do what you need to do. Take care of yourself. You need to get up. You need to get drinks. You need to use the bathroom. Whatever. Just take care of yourself. We'll take lots of breaks. We'll probably take a 5-10 minute break every hour. Um, keep that in mind. Uh, this will be a lot better if you all are engaged in discussions with me. I have stuff to say to you, but it helps a lot if you guys have stuff to say back and to each other as well. So please just be open to discussion and be open to maybe a different opinion from someone else. Just like with our clients, we want to honor confidentiality. So if someone shares a personal story, um, that's not your story to go share with other people. Maybe you can share the lesson you learned from it, but not the details of what happened. And then finally, please ask questions. You can interrupt me anytime. I don't know why I did that. All right, so here's just a quick agenda of what we're going over today. We're going to look at the underlying conditions of sexual assault and domestic violence, get right into it. Domestic violence prevalence, gender norms and roles, empowering survivors, and ethics. Okay, so here's our mission statement. We strive to stop sexual and domestic violence and advocate for personal and societal change through crisis intervention and education. I'd like to start there. That's the foundation of everything we do. Our core values are excellence, respect, self-care, diversity, integrity, and confidentiality. And we'll talk a lot more about some of those, in particular self-care, on one of the other days, and why that's one of our values. So underlying conditions, sexual assault and domestic violence. Um, so, have you guys heard the term rape culture? What does that bring to mind for you? So what's your understanding of what is rape culture? Yeah, music cues, right? Like a lot of people's like ideas about, I would say, relationships and dynamics is from largely informed by music, movies, things like that, right? So you have anything to add to that? It's just acceptance, right? I mean, we kind of are like, that's not great, but what can we do, right? Yeah, I think those are both very true. For me, it makes me think of like young people in like high school and college, which is an environment where a ton of sexual assaults happen, and because of social pressure and developmentally, a lot of the sort of toxic aspects of rape culture play into those situations, making people maybe uncomfortable to speak up, things like that. And that's why one of the things we do for prevention is we go and we visit high schools and do education with them. And we also visit college campuses. So we have one set up at St. Martin because something like 50%, I think, of sexual assaults on campuses happen in the first 2 months of the year. So I think it's largely the dynamic of people moving away for the first time, being exposed to new circumstances, and unfortunately that makes people that can be targeted. This is a good video. This is actually made by some high schoolers, but I think they explain it really well, just to kind of add more to what we said here. If you guys will appreciate this.
Hi, my name is Will, and I'm a leader of Peers. We are a student-led club that provides education, empowerment, respect, and support, with the ultimate goal of ending rape culture in our school and beyond. When we talk to other students, most of them haven't heard of rape culture. Or if they have, it's been through confusing or hypercritical lenses. In this video, we'll begin to explain rape culture as it relates to our school and the world. So, what is rape culture? Well, our very simple definition is that it is a society where sexual assault is prevalent and normalized. First, let's talk about prevalence. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, or RAIN, 1 in 6 women will be victim to attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. For men, that figure is 1 in 33. By RAIN's estimates, an American is raped every 98 seconds. At our high school, the numbers on sexual harassment and assault are largely the same. In a survey of the junior class, nearly half of the students had received unsolicited explicit photos. A quarter had felt coerced into a sexual act they didn't want to do, and 14% identified themselves as victims of sexual assault. So this is a big problem, no matter where you're from. Sexual harassment, violence, and assault are truly prevalent. But according to a US Department of Justice report, 63% of sexual assaults are not reported to the police. And even though a 2009 study found false rape reports only make up 2 to 10% of cases, RAIN estimates that of 1,000 cases of rape, 310 are reported, 57 lead to arrests, and only 6 lead to incarceration of the perpetrator. So, why? Why this disparity? If sexual assault is so prevalent, why do rapists so often escape legal consequences? Well, this brings us to the second component of rape culture: normalization. Quite simply, sexual assault is normalized in our culture, leading to lower reporting and convictions. We live in a society with movies, books, celebrities, and politicians that ascribe to a dichotomy of gender. That is, the idea that men are aggressive, sexually dominant, and always want it, and therefore women, as their opposites, are meek, sexually submissive, and usually don't enjoy nor want sex. And this dichotomy of gender isn't just simplistic, it's problematic. For men, it creates immense social pressure to be sexual conquerors, to pursue women, and to, well, have a lot of sex. Men feeling this social pressure are more likely to ignore consent, especially at college campuses or high school house parties, where alcohol and frat or bro culture can compound the general societal pressure that they already feel. In these situations, assault is presented as normal, sexual conquest. After all, they say, boys will be boys. But these strict gender roles also often dissuade men from reporting sexual assaults when committed against them. Consider actor Terry Crews, who, after sharing his story of sexual assault, faced mockery from both fans and, bizarrely, rapper 50 Cent, questioning why he didn't fight off his assailant. When men report sexual assault, they break with the strict gender roles that are deeply ingrained in society. For many men, it is easier to stay silent than admit victimhood or weakness. For women, the dichotomy of gender is extremely dangerous. Since our culture portrays the average women as not wanting or enjoying sex, women who do want and enjoy sex or simply dress in more revealing clothing are shamed as sluts, whores, hoes, or the new term, thoughts. These labels devalue the woman. Because she has broken with society's expectations of gender, she is considered lesser and perceived as wanting it, a phrase all too often used to justify sexual assault. And when women do report sexual assault, they face victim blaming and social stigma. Judges might ask them why they didn't keep their legs together. Politicians may tell them that if it was a legitimate rape, their body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down. That's a real quote, by the way. And in smaller communities like our own, women who come forward may face campaigns to discredit and question them, and to protect their assailants. In one blog that centers on sexual assault in our town specifically, women repeatedly report refusing to speak out for fear of social stigma. We live in a society where rape and sexual assault are commonplace, sexual harassment even more so. and we live in a society where sexual assault is normalized and minimized. Quite simply, we live in a rape culture. Thanks for watching. You can read our sources in the description down below, and please don't forget to subscribe. We have a few ideas for other videos we can make, but if any seem particularly appealing to you, please let us know in the comments down below. If you're looking to start your own chapter of Peers, or are simply looking to check up on our club, you can follow us on Instagram at Hingham Peers, or on Facebook, Peers Hingham.
I thought that was a really good basic description. It kind of touches bases a little bit on everything. Today and later on in ACT, we're going to talk about gender dynamics a lot, stereotypes and things like that. What I appreciate about this is it touches on that being one of the biggest factors that lead both men and women to not reporting it, right? But it also begins to touch on the idea of people who don't fall like neatly within traditional identities. It becomes a thing that's difficult for them to report as well. So if they're in a non-heterosexual relationship, for example, if they're trans, for example, right? If your identities are kind of at odds with what society tells you, that's going to cause you stress, mental anguish, growing up, right? Which is going to probably discourage you, especially if you're a young person, from maybe speaking up if something does happen. And as we'll see, although the majority of sexual assaults are committed by males on females, like in terms of just numbers, other groups, and we'll look at statistics, are actually higher risk. They're just a smaller sliver of the population, but percentage-wise, they're actually at greater risk. And I just want to emphasize, this is basically what Callie was saying. It's prevalent and it's normalized, right? We kind of dismiss it. I think it's one of the crucial aspects of what rape culture is. Okay, so I'd like you guys to share where does rape culture show up? So we've talked about music, talked about movies. Can you guys think of anything else? And if there's somebody who has a problem with that, they may not speak up, right? Because that's something that's discouraged. So here's some other areas we see it. Victim blaming is common all around. So they talk about, what was she wearing? If, for whatever it was, the body has a way to shut that whole thing down. Slut shaming, denial of prevalence. So I would say that's just kind of minimizing it, or sort of, some people don't even want to like accept that it's a thing that exists in our society. For example, we have sort of a contentious relationship with some of like the colleges and the high schools we go to, because they're like uncomfortable with us bringing it up. So we have to be careful about what we say, depending on what the group is and how, like, so we go to St. Martin's, because it's a Catholic university, they're a little more conservative. They want us there, but we don't say the exact same things as if we go to Evergreen. I would say abstinence emphasis, or abstinence only education, encourages rape culture because it discourages talking about sex-related problems. Rape jokes are very common. They touched on consent in the video, which we'll talk a lot more about. Social media and advertising, movies. A lot of us get messages about rape culture from our family dynamics. We see how maybe a father treats their mother, or we see other relationship dynamics that are important people in our lives, and that, shapes how we grow up to view those same things, especially if we see ourselves as like them, right? So if you're a straight man and you grow up with both your parents, you're going to be looking at the dynamic of dating, right? Sometimes it can be minimized by law enforcement. I've actually had some really good conversations with local law enforcement here, and I feel pretty confident they actually here take it very seriously. We had this self-defense seminar last weekend, and there was a couple cops there. There was one who works for Olympia Police, and he trains all of the new officers on like non-lethal force, you know. Um, and there was another one from the Assistant County Sheriff's Office, and we're also working on the implementing the DVHRP model, which is like a collaboration with us, prosecutors, all the local police, and the local sheriff to help identify and intervene like on the scene of crimes. Okay, have you guys heard about DVHRP? Did you use certifications? Okay, you're okay. So DVHRT stands for Domestic Violence High Risk Team. It's basically this model that's created by a group called the Geiger Institute, which is a nonprofit from the East Coast of the Boston area. And they basically did research about what are the highest risk factors that predict domestic violence homicide. And so they created this like 20 question worksheet that's like 20 questions that are the highest risk factors, and then you quantify it. And they had 5 of these, and you use that to sort of triage and see who's the most at risk. And the idea being, um, soon law enforcement will have that with them, and they'll give that at the site. And they haven't determined what is the threshold. Is it 10? Is it 12? We haven't determined that yet. But they'll look at that number, and if it's above a certain number, they know this is super high risk or greater risk than average, right? For the average domestic violence victim. And then they'll connect us with us and whoever we hire from DVHP. All right. I think we touched on all those. Okay. I'll go to some statistics here. So, like I said, 90% of sexual assault victims are female. So this woman, Peggy Reeves Sanday, she's a researcher, and um, she basically did some research that kind of counters the idea that rape culture is kind of inherent to um, human societies, which some people try and claim it's just sort of like murder happens, rape happens, right? And she's done research on different cultural groups, and she found that high rates of rape are connected with like cultures that glorify violence, objectify women, and queer people, and the encouragement of tougher, aggressive, kind of toxic masculinity to men. And her theory is that rape is the sexual expression of those aspects of violence that are prevalent in most cultures, particularly often by men who are in extreme disharmony with their environment. The thing about people who are abusive, they're usually in some sort of disharmony with their environment, right? They're dysregulated in some way. And so, yeah, so basically the takeaway is he found that societies that regarded gender roles, even if they had strict, clear and distinct gender roles, but if they viewed them equally, but just different, those societies tend to have much less sexual assault. All right. Domestic violence is rare. That's a myth that we have. Every 9 seconds, a woman is assaulted in the U.S. I think you said in the video, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 33 men. That 1 in 33 men statistic, I'm not sure where they got that because I've seen other ones that are like 1 in 2. So, um, pretty much everyone knows someone hates applications. Um, Another myth: we do a good job of punishing abusers. Half of all assaults are not reported, and less than 3% lead to a conviction. And rapes are reported at half the rate of robberies and other assault crimes. Another myth is women are likely to be attacked, most likely to be attacked by a stranger as a random victim. It does happen, but 97% of domestic violence murders are committed by an intimate partner, and 80% of assaults overall are committed by someone known to the victim, either an acquaintance or IP down an intimate partner. And another myth is that domestic violence is a relatively small problem. Um, It affects 1 in 3 women. There are 1 in 9 men. I need to align my statistics here, but it's a huge problem. Like I said, we all know somebody who's experienced it if we haven't ourselves. All right, let's get into talking about specific communities and this stuff. So this is the LGBTQ community. And if we look at this chart here, we see women for each of these groups is in the green and men is in the orange. You can see across the board, there's heterosexual, gay, lesbian, and bisexual women have a much greater, especially over here when we get into bisexual, right? And then if we compare men, bisexual men also have a greater skill set amongst men. If we compare that to there's data from a different study that studied basically prevalence amongst trans people, and you can see in general that's higher than almost everybody except for bisexual women. Yeah, pretty crazy. What do you guys think are some of the reasons that members of this community might not reporting assault or seek help? What are the barriers they might face? Whoever they go to, whether it's police or medical, may have their own prejudices. They may not, right? They might blame it on lifestyle, for example. Many people, many queer people, it's not safe for them to publicly be out, right? So for them to go and publicly identify that way could be very risky. We've had issues, or we've had experiences with trans individuals at SART calls, is when we respond to the hospital, and the hospital not even being able to address them by the chosen gender. Like, they didn't, like, they were like, we can't do that in our system when it was like, I believe it was assigned male at birth, that was now a trans woman, and the hospital was like, we can't just put female. Like, they made a huge whole deal about it, which basically made that person like, well, it's great. I'm here because I just got assaulted, and you're squabbling with me about my gender identity. Yeah, yes. To me, that's an excuse, right? Like, it was just someone was uncomfortable and they didn't know what to do with it. And I would hope that nurses and medical people would just kind of accept people as they are because that's their job, right? But that's not always true. And we see that sometimes with SARP. We see maybe nurses that kind of have like a judgmental attitude about the person who's there. We also have lots of great nurses that are really compassionate. So I definitely don't want to make it seem like all nurses are intolerant. That's not what I'm trying to say. Amongst the queer community, suicide is the leading cause of death for people 10 to 24 years old. I believe prevalent sexual assaults are certainly one of the contributors to that, along with various other traumas that are frequently experienced by queer people. All right, women of color are more likely also to experience sexual assault. So here we have lifetime prevalence of rape amongst women by race. We have the average overall is 14.8% for women. For this particular study, that one is lower than the other ones I've seen. But as you can see, in particular, American Indian, Alaska Native, mixed race are much higher. Black and white are actually higher than the average, and Hispanic, Latino, and Asian Pacific Islander are below average. I suspect since these tend to be more conservative communities, there's probably more underreporting in those communities. That's a theory I have. So I wonder if we had more accurate data, I suspect the overall average would be higher as well. So, just like 90% of rapes are women, but still 10% are men, 80% are white women, but still 20% are women of color. And women of color, as we see here, have a higher chance of experiencing this assault. Most victims are under 30. In particular, like the 18 to 25 range is very high risk. College-age women have 3 times the risk of women in general, and college-age women who are not in college have 4 times these kind of things. I think that one's interesting to me because it kind of goes against stereotypes that like I think I had a stereotype that like most sexual assaults in that age range would happen in college, right? And you tell us that well, it's not true. I mean, it's definitely a problem, but it's not that simple. 80,000 inmates were sexually assaulted or raped each year. 60,000 children substantiated or indicated for sexual abuse. 433,000 Americans 12 and older, and 18,900 people in the military experienced being victimized. We've had SART calls that are military members, and pretty easy to imagine if you were particularly a young female in the military, you were assaulted. There's a lot of pressure in place to not disturb that. So prisoners also experience sexual assault. Sometimes our SARP responses are for people who are incarcerated and assaulted in prison, either by other inmates or by guards. So estimated 80,000 each year are assaulted in prison or jail. 60% is done by staff. That's pretty crazy. By law, prisoners cannot consent to sexual relationship with a staff member. So in that 60%, that includes anyone who claims, any prisoner who claims to be in a consensual relationship. Legally, it cannot be counted that way. But, I mean, there's plenty of stories of prisoners getting together with guards who then end up having to be forced out of their job because they want to stay together, and definitely not unheard of. More than half of all alleged rapists have at least one prior conviction. So you can see actually the biggest group here has 2 to 4 convictions. So the point here is that it's very rare that someone will perpetrate one time only. So from a prevention standpoint, trying to prevent it is intervening. Ideally, we want to intervene before assaults happen, but once they do happen, those ones we really want to intervene in because that person is likely to go with another type of offense. And in my experience, that's true. I went on a SART call recently, and it led to an arrest. The guy's in jail. I looked up his past charges, and he had like 4 prior DV convictions and 4 prior sexual violence over the last like 10 years. All right, so this is kind of a lot. Simply, what I'm trying to show here is these are assault and battery and robberies, and these are sexual assault. The main point I'm trying to get across here is that number one, these are reported 62%, 62%, 31%. This is reported about half as often as other types of personal assault. And we see, even though these are reported half as much, we still only have about 2.5% being incarcerated, which is similar to the numbers for these ones. So what that means to me is if this was reported at a similar rate to these types of assault, this number would be a little bit higher, maybe around 5% or so. Extrapolating there. So that's definitely an issue that is a. All right. So these are some risk factors that might contribute to domestic violence or sexual assault, either to experience it or to perpetrate it. Previous trauma, disabilities, poverty, houselessness, LGBTQ, personal color. immigrant minors and young adults, women, mental illness, substance abuse is a huge one. Seems almost every chronic long-term VD situation I've seen has had a substance abuse element to it. Economic stress, financial and emotional dependence, low educational achievement or opportunity, exposure to violence, and communities with low social cohesion. Meaning communities, they've researched it in communities where people have more cohesion with their neighbors. They know their neighbors look out for each other. Uh, they are less likely to experience these types of things because they have more support around them, more eyes that might witness them. So, from all that, the most important thing to recognize is it can happen to anybody, regardless of age, gender, social, financial status, religion, language, and no one is ever at fault for being assaulted. Understanding some of the statistics, though, can help you to better meet people where they're at, especially people who aren't in that 80% of white women, right? People outside of that. Um, I think those groups can often feel very excluded from services. A lot of shelters are like women only, right? And so, what's one of our things is we just take everybody. Um, and but at the same time, it's still largely low. Excuse me, largely heterosexual. Okay, let's talk a little bit about gender roles and norms. This is interesting.
The big talkers, and wow, wow, wow. In an insanely viral video, random women are asked, if you were alone in the woods, would you rather encounter a bear or a man? Well, here's how they answered.
Would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear?
Bear. Man is scary. With a bear. Depends what man, but probably a bear.
Oh, 100% a bear, which is like terrifying to say, but
definitely a bear. Some men are very scary out there.
a bear.
I would say a man.
1 vote out of 7 for a man.
Wow.
And while some people initially laughed at, first of all, the question and then the answer, saying, wow, how crazy is this? Who would want to be in the woods with a bear? Well, it opened up a huge and critical discussion about women's safety. I don't know if they intended this, but this is what happened. Why do women fear men more than potentially deadly bears? Comments have been coming in from all over the world, and they include, quote, I know a bear's intention. I don't know a man's intentions, no matter how nice they are. One woman said, no one's going to ask me if I led the bear on or give me a pamphlet on bear attack prevention tips.
Ouch.
And wow, this is a big one. Quote, if the bear attacks me and I make it out of the woods, everyone's going to believe me and have sympathy for me. But if a man attacks me and I make it out, I'm going to spend my whole life trying to get people to believe me and have sympathy for me. This says a lot.
Wow.
Many men, as you can imagine, are flabbergasted by this, and a lot of them got really defensive. Well, this guy stepped in and he said, look, men, stand down and actually listen to what these women are truly trying to say here.
The bottom line here being is that women are terrified of men. And that's not up for debate. That is how they feel about men. The answer to their question has nothing to do with the bear and everything to do with how they feel around men.
Now, this woman, yeah, it's powerful, right? This woman says she posted her thoughts on this, like she'd rather encounter a bear. And one man proceeded to harass this woman on social media. He followed her to every single one of her platforms, trying to prove that men are safe. He even posted a bunch of statistics. And when she kindly asked him to stop and please leave her alone with her thoughts and feelings, he found her at work.
What?
She says, if this doesn't prove the point that these women are trying to make about like how it feels sometimes to be in a scenario you don't want to be in and continue to get kind of followed down the path, let's compare it to the woods, then I guess this is where we are. I think it was a harmless question, but it really turned into a big
It
debate.
did. I mean, that really opened a can of worms, right? When we're talking about women and how they deal and process with sexual assault and the disbelief that comes with that. Like, if I'm attacked by a bear, everyone's going to have sympathy. If I'm attacked by a man, everyone's going to question whether it actually happened. It's
Wow.
awful, and that speaks volumes. I will say, when I first heard the question, men or bear, or man or bear, I would rather come across a man than a bear. I'm not trying to be chased down by a bear.
Yeah,
but-
and me too. I think there are so many great men out there. We all know
Right.
them.
Yes,
we
yes,
all love
we're
them
married to
out
them.
there.
Yes,
Yeah,
for
some of
sure.
us birthed them.
Correct.
But I can understand the fear of some people who had different experiences, and they're worried about that. It surprised me to see that so many. Was that 6 out of 7 said bear?
Yeah.
That one was kind of surprising.
I think that's where this then got
Yeah,
legs,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and went viral. And a lot of women were like,
think
wow, the more I think about it. But look, we're also raising daughters and sons. So let's
Strong and compassionate, and think the best in people, and be prepared for the worst. Maybe.
Yeah.
Interesting, right? Yeah. Okay. This is about a 15-minute video, so we'll watch this and then we'll take a break after it.
I want you to channel your 9-year-old self, and I'm going to ask you a very important question. Hey, you, 9-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you remember? Did it come true? When I was 9, I wanted to be a Spice Girls understudy. I would have been bowl cut from Spice. The Spice Girl thing didn't work out for me. Instead, I became a social scientist. And over the last decade, I've been studying gender inequality, and there is a whole lot of it. What if, when we asked kids what they wanted to be when they grow up, they told us the other possibilities that awaited them? What if little boys said, I'll have a higher risk of skin cancer? I'll be treated like a less competent parent. I'll have a higher risk of being incarcerated. And what if little girls told us, I might struggle with an eating disorder? I won't have a lot of political role models. I'll get paid less just because I'm a girl. And what if gender nonconforming kids told us, I'll probably be bullied by my peers. I might get kicked out of my house. I won't feel safe using the toilet when I'm out in public. These are the realities that children are facing because these are the realities that adults are facing. I have 3 messages for you today. The first is there are real and harmful gender disparities experienced by adults. The second is these disparities are rooted in childhood. And the third is we have the power to do something about it. There are gender inequalities in virtually every aspect of adult life, in relationships, at home, at work, at church, in politics, in health, even the Olympics. These disparities start with stereotypes, assumptions that there's one way to be a woman and there's one way to be a man, and men and women, they might as well be from different planets. The reason men are more likely to get skin cancer is because men just have weaker skin than women, right? No. In large part, it's because men are socialized to take on masculine jobs and hobbies, such as construction or agricultural work and sports that tend to be outside, exposed to the sun. Lotion, including sunscreen, is marketed as a feminized product and is in conflict with stereotypes of masculinity, which values risk, danger, and ruggedness above cautionary behavior. The same stereotypes that lead to lower rates of seatbelt and helmet use among men and higher rates of injury and accident-related deaths. Once men have skin cancer, they're more likely than women to die from it. A cornerstone of masculinity is don't show that you are scared or hurting. Making an appointment with a doctor does just that. Women in America make an average of 79 cents for every dollar earned by men. Even though women earn more college degrees, they're offered lower starting salaries and they're less likely to negotiate for more. And women with children aren't promoted as often as men with children. Women are missing out on nearly $500,000 in their lifetime. A cornerstone of femininity is don't show that you are assertive. Be grateful for what you're offered. Don't rock the boat. Women should not be difficult to work with. Gender inequalities don't magically appear after high school graduation. Gender socialization and gender policing begins much earlier, well before kindergarten graduation. The perpetuation of gender stereotypes occurs throughout childhood, and since the development of ultrasound technology, it begins in utero. From birth, children are taught the social and cultural norms that are expected of them based on their anatomy. But what those social and cultural norms are varies by time and place. Boys are conditioned to take risks and be athletic and competitive. Girls are conditioned to value appearance over ambition and to put others before themselves. And when it comes to gender nonconforming kids, gender-bending girls are often celebrated and called tomboys, while gender-bending boys are often shamed and called sissies. The masculine and feminine paths are not complementary. Rather, they're hierarchical, with boys and men being valued and more powerful than girls and women. Boys learn early that getting hurt is part of being a boy. Brush yourself off, don't cry, be a man, and put that doll down, that's for girls. But make sure in 30 years you're a really good dad. Remember that $500,000 women miss out on? That's not including the lost cash during childhood and adolescence. Boys do about 45 minutes of chores for every hour that girls do. Yet boys are 15% more likely to get paid for the chores they do. And when girls do get paid allowance, they're pocketing about 73 cents on the boy's dollar. Sound familiar? Childhood gender inequalities are growing up to be adulthood gender inequalities. We're trying to fix the problem when it's too late. But how could we eliminate the problem before it even begins? First, we have to ask ourselves some questions. Why do we ask pregnant people, are you having a boy or a girl? Because we think boys and girls require different things? Is knowledge of a person's genitals the foundation of how we treat them? The reason expecting parents have to wait until around week 16 to find out what they're having is because prior to that time, fetuses don't look different. In utero, everyone starts out the same. Around week 10 of gestation, a fetus with a Y sex chromosome will typically begin producing testosterone, and their genitalia will typically differentiate into testes and a penis instead of ovaries and a vagina. About half of babies have XX sex chromosomes and are labeled female. About half of babies have XY sex chromosomes and are labeled male. Other babies are born with intersex variations. Those with intersex traits are born with internal and or external genitalia that may be different than what we might typically expect. But biological sex is a spectrum, not a binary. And male and female babies aren't very different at all. In fact, there's more variation among male babies and among female babies than there is between male and female babies. In an enlightening study, researchers placed 11-month-old infants on a platform with a sloped ramp, and they watched the babies crawl. Male and female babies showed identical levels of motor performance. What differed was their mothers' estimations of their crawling abilities. Mothers of girls underestimated their daughters' performance, and mothers of boys overestimated their sons' performance. The physical, verbal, and emotional differences that we see between boys and girls are largely socially constructed and reinforced through stereotypes. What if we had the same mindset about sex chromosomes as we do any other aspect of someone's DNA, like their hair or eye color, that they don't really matter? Green-eyed people aren't sent down dramatically different career paths than brown-eyed people. There aren't different racks of clothing for blondes and brunettes. We don't have reveal parties where people make bets on a fetus's attached or detached earlobes. What if, instead of treating boys and girls dramatically different, we tried to instill in them well-rounded positive traits, like kindness, a sense of adventure, compassion, critical thinking, and comedic timing, qualities we don't think tall or short people are more or less capable of. Most of us want a world without gender inequality, but it's going to take us all being honest with ourselves about how we reinforce it. If equality is what we want, we have to create it. Not long ago, something changed inside of me, quite literally. I was pregnant. And pregnancy and impending parenthood made me think differently about the world I studied, the world my child would be entering. I considered all of the information I had about the harmful impacts of gender inequality, and I understood that my child's gender identity would be up to them, not me. I couldn't stomach the idea of placing my kid in the girl box or the boy box and then sending them down a path that I knew could be constraining. I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if we could opt our kids out of gender stereotypes? And the more I thought about it, this fantasy turned into a possibility. And then this possibility turned into a reality. I am now the very proud, very smitten parent of Zoomer Coyote. My husband and I decided to raise Zoomer to be gender creative. We didn't assign a gender to Zoomer, and we don't disclose their sex unless it's necessary. And we use the gender-neutral pronouns they, them, and their. Like all babies, Zoomer needs food and sleep and clothes and love and attention and so many diapers. But we're giving Zoomer the freedom and encouragement to explore their interests and eventually self-identify as a girl or a boy or any other label they think fits. We trust that Zoomer will know who they are, just like everyone in this room knows who they are. In the meantime, Zoomer doesn't experience an onslaught of gender stereotypes or social expectations or restrictions based on their anatomy. Zoomer isn't treated like a boy or a girl. Zoomer's treated like a child who deserves to never hear the words, "That's not for boys," or "That's not for girls." Zoomer is taught that everything is for everyone. There are very few hard, fast rules about the world we live in. And children are accepting, curious creatures who trust us to answer their questions. You do realize we can tell kids anything, and they are likely to believe us, which means we get to teach kids about the world we wish for them. Gender inequalities cannot exist if they are not perpetuated. So the next time you're interacting with a female child, forego a compliment about her appearance. Instead, ask her what book she last read. Ask her to tell you about her favorite planet. Allow her to take risks and scrape her knees. The next time you're interacting with a male child, validate his fears. Give him the opportunity to share his emotions and engage in caretaking activities. Introduce him to a female role model. Ask him if he wants his fingernails painted. We can create a world where we genuinely value individuality above conformity. And we can create a world where everyone grows up to be equal. Thank you.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. Well, you're talking about like femininity and masculinity too, right? And it's like trying to divorce those from gender, right? Because I think situationally, feminine and masculine traits are helpful for everyone to have, right? And so it's like, rather than like boys don't play with dolls, it's like it's okay for boys to be feminine, right? Or have feminine traits. Yeah, I think it's a huge point. I think the majority of people identify as cisgender, right? They identify with their assigned gender. And of course, I think all cis people as well have experiences where they felt sort of boxed in by whatever that identity is, even if it's a chosen identity, right? But yeah, I very much agree with what you're saying. Is like it's like any other social problem. It's like you need allies in the majority to be understanding and open-minded and compassionate, right? To move us all towards a place where people can be who they want to be. He was talking about, really young kids being gendered, and that was one of the biggest things that was frustrating for me when I was teaching. Was I was most of my colleagues were young white women, um, college educated, outwardly like liberal in the stereotypical sense. Um, but I also saw so the group of people that on one hand was very like girls can do anything, girl power, right? And I'm like, that's cool, I'm for that. But on the other hand, there's a very particular maternal type of woman, young woman who becomes a teacher, which I feel when that's 80% of the people you're surrounded with, um, impacts socialization of kids a lot. And so you have to be really intentional about, you have to have people that sort of break the stereotypes. And I'm not saying you can't have people that fulfill stereotypes too, but, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to get into teaching was I was like, most people don't have examples of like kind, compassionate men in their life, And I was like, I think there's a lot of power in that. Plus, I have a lot of privileges just for who I am, right? And I wanted to be in a position where I could use that to positively influence and empower people. And I felt there was a lot of resistance to that from a lot of people. That was pretty discouraging for me. I think she touches on sort of the ways that everyone is sort of boxed in by gender roles. I think sometimes the consequences are more severe for women than men, but at the same time, I would say men very much suffer from being boxed in as well. I know, like, I've had a long history of depression and anxiety going back to like 10 years old, and it was really hard to like. First of all, so I can't speak up about it, right? That was the first message that was very clear from everyone, including my parents, most strongly. Um, but even as an adult on my own, I've had to like advocate for myself so much. Um, and that's just an example of one of the ways that I see it. I felt boxed in, right? Having being an age. All right. Anything else you guys want to add to that? Before we take a break. All right. Let's